Yo, what is up guys? Boy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully you guys are well. A quick preview and prediction for Andy Ruiz Jr. versus Anthony Joshua 2. This fight of course goes down on the 7th of December and it takes place at the Diriyah Arena in Saudi Arabia. I think I've butchered that, but we'll go with it. What's the worst that could happen, right? But yeah, in the first fight, of course, as we know, Andy Ruiz Jr. pulled off a massive upset. He didn't just beat Anthony Joshua, but he beat Joshua in a decisive and fairly one-sided manner. You know, nobody was expecting that. Even the people who were giving Ruiz more of a chance than most, nobody was calling Ruiz to blow this guy out. But that's what happened, and Ruiz pulled off the upset. Will this rematch be any different? I've got to say, I'm really looking forward to it. I love fights where the stakes are high, and this is one of those fights. One of the biggest fights of the year. Anthony Joshua's career is on the line, and Andy Ruiz Jr. is fighting to keep what he earned back in June. Who wants it more? Who's got more to prove? Is his back against the wall? Will that bring out the best performance from him, or will he crumble under the pressure? Is Andy Ruiz Jr. now too comfortable as a champion? Is he living that good life a little too much? Has he lost his hunger? Pardon the pun. There's a lot to consider. It's a hell of a fight. And like I said, arguably the biggest fight of the year, to be honest. And yeah, one of the fights I've looked forward to most this year as well. So I'm really hyped for this rematch. The momentum is starting to build. The hype is starting to build. And I think people are really excited over here for this rematch. So I can't wait. Big time boxing. That's what we love to see. But let's start with the tail of the tape. We will start with the champion, Andy Ruiz Jr. Andy Ruiz Jr. has a record of 33 wins, 1 defeat, 0 draws, 22 of his 33 wins coming by way of knockout. Obviously his only defeat coming to Joseph Parker, who funnily enough got beat by Anthony Joshua. Anthony Joshua has a record of 22 wins, 1 defeat, 0 draws, 21 of his 22 wins come by way of knockout. Obviously that 1 defeat is coming off Andy Ruiz in the first fight. Andy Ruiz Jr. is listed as 6'2" with a 74-inch reach, and he's an orthodox fighter, whereas Anthony Joshua is listed as 6'6" with an 82-inch reach. He's also an orthodox fighter, so Joshua, on paper, has a 4-inch height advantage and also an 8-inch reach advantage. So as we know, Joshua, the taller, longer man. And by the way, just for the record, I don't believe Andy Ruiz Jr. is actually 6'2". I think he's closer to 6 foot. You know, you see him in pictures with other fighters in lighter weight classes like Terence Crawford, and Andy Ruiz Jr. isn't really significantly bigger. I don't think he's 6'2". I think he's closer to 6 foot. But, you know, that's just a throwaway comment, just to put it out there. But as we know, Joshua is the taller, longer man. Can he do a better job of actually utilising that in this rematch? We will see, and we will discuss that in a second. And as for the punching power, you know, Joshua's got more of a knockout ratio in comparison to Ruiz. And, you know, despite that first fight where Ruiz knocked out Joshua, I still believe Joshua is the bigger puncher of the two. Not because Joshua has a higher knockout ratio, but he's knocked out, you know, proven tough guys like Dillian Whyte and Alexander Povetkin. You know, these guys have legitimate chins, and he managed to knock both out. So I think Joshua does have more power, but obviously in that first fight he couldn't capitalise on that. And the reason he was stopped, not because Andy Ruiz Jr. is this massive puncher, I don't think he is. I think Joshua's beat bigger punchers than Andy Ruiz Jr. It's how he puts his punches in bunches, how he applies pressure, counters on the front foot, and he can throw coming forwards. You know, and Joshua can't really defend against that style. I think that was more to it. It was more that Joshua couldn't really defend against that style of Ruiz, more than Ruiz Jr. is this massive puncher. He can clearly crack, don't get me wrong. He does have power, but I don't think his power is quite as devastating as some people make out to be honest. But, you know, that's just my opinion. You know, I can't really gauge that on anything. I just get that feeling with Andy Ruiz Jr. But onto the stylistic matchup. It's really interesting, as we know, as we've seen, Andy Ruiz Jr. has the style to beat Anthony Joshua. He has tools that really affect Anthony Joshua. Joshua, throughout his career, even in the amateurs, always struggled with shorter guys who could apply pressure with decent hand speed and who could throw punches coming forwards. You know, look at his stoppage loss to Mihai Nistor in the amateurs, a guy who come forward with decent hand speed, decent combinations, and Joshua really couldn't defend against that style. And that was back in the amateurs, and I think that trait has followed him into the pro ranks. I still don't think he's comfortable with that style. You know, look at Carlos Takam, again, not quite as aggressive as, you know, Mihai Nistor or Andy Ruiz Jr., but a smaller guy who can come forward, throw punches, who can get low, who can stay compact, and he gave Joshua problems. Even Alexander Povetkin, who isn't completely like Ruiz Jr., as we know, but he does bring some similar attributes to Andy Ruiz Jr., and as we know, Povetkin gave Joshua problems early on as well. You know, an aggressive smaller heavyweight who's good on the counter, on the front foot. You know, those type of fighters will always give Joshua problems. We've seen it since the amateurs, and it's still happening now. So I think that's a defect that will always be in Joshua's game, to be quite honest. But can he nullify that for this one fight? Potentially. As I've said, Ruiz has the style to really, really hurt Joshua and beat him, as we've seen. However, Joshua does have significant enough physical advantages to negate that for large periods of this fight. He does. The taller, longer man. Like I said, he's the taller, longer man. 8-inch reach advantage, 4-inch height advantage, and actually he's got quicker feet than Andy Ruiz Jr. Not by much, but I would say Joshua's feet are slightly quicker. So he's got the tools to keep Andy Ruiz Jr. at distance. He does. He's got the physical attributes to do so. It's whether he can kind of put it all together in this fight to get that win. I believe he can. I do. You know, it's not that Anthony Joshua's a great back foot boxer or a great, you know, technical wizard. He's not. But like I said, he's got the physical attributes. And against Joseph Parker, he showed that he can stand off you and box and take more time and be more patient. I know Joseph Parker wasn't really applying pressure, so, you know, take that for what it's worth. But I think he's got the ability to do it, and he's got the ability to take the sting out of Ruiz in certain rounds. But that's the key here. I don't really believe he can do it for 12 rounds straight, to be honest. I don't believe Joshua's got that in him. I believe he's got it in him to do it for large periods or a few rounds, but not for whole fight. At some point he will need to mix it up, and obviously that's where he's in danger, because Andy Ruiz Jr. likes it when you set your feet and you punch, because he will punch with you. He's confident in his hand speed and timing that his shots will get off first and he will cause more damage. You know, look at the Joseph Parker fight, for example. When Parker had that fight long behind the jab, Ruiz was largely ineffective. But every time Parker actually set his feet and decided to, you know, trade a bit, Parker was coming off second best. And we saw that in the Joshua fight as well. 9 times out of 10, when Joshua punched with Ruiz, Joshua was coming off second best. He was the guy shipping the punishment. He was the guy getting caught with the better shots. And he was the guy getting hurt. So in those moments in this fight, what does Joshua do? When Joshua needs to set his feet, when he needs a break? Well, you know, try to minimise punching with Andy Ruiz Jr. for a start. You know, maybe in this fight, Joshua needs to adopt that Vladimir Klitschko game plan. Lean and hold, jab and grab. You know, when Joshua is tired from moving around, he can't afford to back up with his hands down in straight lines because Ruiz is going to jump on him. And he certainly can't afford to punch with Ruiz because that really puts him at a big risk. Also, just a quick disclaimer here. I'm not saying Joshua can't win this fight by punching with Ruiz. Obviously, Joshua hits hard. If he connects a perfect shot, he could knock Ruiz out. That's a possibility. All I'm saying is, if Joshua does punch with Ruiz, I just think that plays into Ruiz's hands more than it does Joshua's. If these guys did that 10 times, more often than not, Ruiz Jr. is going to come out on top, in my opinion. So Joshua in this fight needs to minimise that, minimise punching with Ruiz. Only do it when you're desperate or you've got no other choice. And when you need a break, you know, maybe it's a jab and grab type of affair, where you jab and you fall in, you hold Ruiz and you take a breather. And while you're taking a breather, being the bigger, taller, longer man, you're sapping the energy out of Ruiz. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword for Joshua. He can recover and he's sapping Ruiz's gas tank. So when he needs a rest, he needs to be sensible and he needs to, you know, try to keep on taking something out of Ruiz's tank in this bout. Because Ruiz Jr., he does need to be discouraged this time around, whether that be by draining his stamina or, catching him with something big. And I'm not saying Joshua needs to fight a completely negative fight. Of course not, He does need to get Ruiz Jr.'s respect, and I think that's important. He needs to try and make the most of Ruiz's aggression. You'd imagine Ruiz Jr. is going to be the front foot fighter in this bout, so he does need to try and walk Ruiz onto certain shots. He can't be completely negative, You can still be assertive fighting on the back foot, so, a little bit more variety is needed from Joshua's game. So, for example, while fighting on the back foot, hold your feet for a split second, throw a feint as Ruiz is coming in, half step back, crack him with that uppercut. Joshua's got a lovely uppercut, and in the mid-range the guy is extremely good, and that uppercut could be a key punch here against a shorter, aggressive fighter who doesn't really take his head off centre line. Ruiz Jr. for a pressure fighter and a small guy doesn't really move his head that much, so I could see a scenario where this guy is open to the uppercut, and Joshua certainly has that punch, but he will need to set it up, and you can set that punch up on the back foot. Also, his short chopping right hand as well. I mentioned this in my Keys to Victory video. At times Joshua falls in with his right hand. He throws it really short and he'll kind of fall into it. He needs to avoid using that shot a lot in this fight. He can't keep on using it because it would get him in trouble if he falls in too much. However, there are times you can use that shot. Same scenario. Fight on the back foot, hold your feet, draw Ruiz in, half step back, short chopping right hand. Ruiz is open to these shots. So I'm not saying Joshua needs to be completely negative. He shouldn't be completely negative. He still needs to score. He still needs to land some big punches to get Ruiz's respect. But he needs to pick the right moments to do it. And he needs to be extremely smart when he throws and when he moves. He needs to transition offense to defense, defense to offense fluidly. And that's one thing we've not really seen Joshua do. So that is, you've got to keep that into account. We've never seen Joshua box this type of fight. And I'm sitting here saying he needs to do this, he needs to do that. But we've never seen Joshua do it. And that is my main gripe in this rematch. As for Ruiz Jr., again, for him, I think the keys to victory are quite simple. Obviously, if Joshua makes the same mistakes as the first fight, capitalise. If Joshua holds his feet and he's punching, punch with him. Make the most of that hand speed, combination punching and counter punchability, because Ruiz's hand-eye coordination, his hand speed, his counter punching, his punch placement, his variety is a lot better than AJ's. So if he punches with Joshua, chances are he's going to come off best. And also again, when applying pressure, he is going to be the front foot fighter in this fight. In this rematch, I would like to see a bit more head movement from Andy Ruiz Jr. Nothing extravagant, just subtle head movement. Like John Ryder against Callum Smith. The guy wasn't extravagantly moving his head. He was just slipping left and right, slipping the jab by an inch or two, and then he'll close the gap and get on the inside. Nothing extravagant. You don't need to waste a lot of energy by slipping punches. You don't. A lot of fighters make that mistake where they use a lot of energy, making over-exaggerated movements to slip punches. You don't need to do that. Ruiz can just, a bit of subtle head movement here and there, some nice slipping to get on the inside and do your work. And another thing Ruiz done really well in the first fight that, in my opinion, he didn't get credit for was the body work. A lot of people were very took back by the knockdowns, and I can understand why. But I felt Ruiz Jr.'s bodywork in this fight was one of the keys to victory for him. I felt that was one of the reasons he won that fight. He was displaying a really good jab to the body throughout the fight. And as the fight went on, as Joshua was tiring, the body attack got doubled down. For example, I think it was round 6, and Andy Ruiz Jr. landed a really damaging punch that a lot of people missed. I think it was towards the end of a round. He landed a lovely straight right hand into the solar plexus of Anthony Joshua, and you could tell that shot just sucked the wind out of Anthony Joshua. I think that was the real shot that finished Joshua, by the way. That body shot in round 6. I think that shot took it all out of him, and in round 7, he just had nothing left. So in this rematch, I really want to see Andy Ruiz Jr. go back to that body. I really believe that's an avenue for success for Andy Ruiz Jr. And again, in the past, Joshua has really felt body shots, and, body shots have been effective against him. That Dillian White fight, for example, after White hurt Joshua to the head, He landed a series of good body shots, and you could tell those body shots were affecting Joshua. I think it was the second or third round. And yeah, he was really feeling those body shots. And even against Povetkin as well, to a lesser extent, but again, Povetkin was doing some good work to the body, which was quite effective. So Ruiz in this rematch, don't neglect the body. Don't neglect the body. So I think with Ruiz Jr., it's a case of, doing what you did first time around, do what worked, but obviously try to add some improvements and some different looks. Don't do the exact same thing again because, Joshua, he knows what to expect this time around. So change it up a bit, but ultimately build on what won you that first fight. And, Ruiz Jr.'s style isn't going to change. So for me, ultimately, he will need to do the same thing. His style won him the first fight. It's not him who has to change drastically, it's Joshua, as we know. So, going into this rematch, I genuinely give both guys a really good chance. I will say I don't think that was the optimum Joshua we saw first time around. I do believe he was slightly off the pace, so I am expecting a better version of himself in this rematch. Will that make a difference? Time will tell. I think this prediction is extremely hard. I've been going back and forth in my mind for a long, long time, and I'm not really confident. Despite how definitive that first fight was, I'm still not confident, for some reason. I'm not. Maybe it's because there's more on the line and, Joshua will have a lot more on his side this time around. Because first time around, Ruiz Jr. was supposed to be a knockover job and the contingencies weren't really in place to, save Joshua. But in this rematch, he's still the A-side. It's in Saudi Arabia. It's a Matchroom promoted card and he needs to win. So, don't be surprised if there are some, questionable officiating and judging. You have to consider that. It has to be said. I'm sorry, it does. When you predict fights, you do need to take that into account. And, it's something to think about. But if I had to pick, and you guys want me to pick, you don't want to hear me sitting on the fence. If I had to pick, I think I'm going with an Anthony Joshua points win with some rocky moments along the way. Potentially controversial, but I believe Joshua will retain his belt in this fight. Not a confident pick. In fact, don't be surprised if I change my mind and upload another video. It's one of those fights. I've never actually done that on this channel. I've never made a prediction amendment. Maybe this is the fight where it happens, but right now, I'm siding towards a Joshua close points win with some shaky moments along the way. Wouldn't be surprised to see a knockdown either way, to be honest. But I've got Joshua close points win. Maybe controversial. Share your thoughts below. Peace.